Today we're talking about one of the most recognizable brands in pianos, Kohler and Campbell. An amazing rich history that dates all the way back to 1896. Make sure you stick around because it's a very interesting story.
Gonna talk about the naked guy?
It's coming.
Hi, this is Ted with Alamo Music Center in beautiful downtown San Antonio, Texas.
I'm Patrick Marr. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channels, check out our other videos, sign up for notifications, like our videos, leave us comments. We appreciate your support. We love to interact with you. The naked guy.
Hey, for the piano industry and all its lack of notoriety, this one is a newsflash.
Well, usually things are slow moving in the piano industry. It's a very respectable, industry. There's piano parties and, high
a couple
society.
notches above morticians in terms of secrecy and silence and stuff like
and
that.
So
discretion.
It's funny when researching one of these, great brands like Kohler and Campbell. This is one of the news stories that pops up. You have the article right here.
I do.
And so it dates from what?
Chicago, September 25th, 1957. A North Carolina piano manufacturer plunged to his death yesterday from a 13th floor window of the Conrad Hilton Hotel on Michigan Avenue. He was Charles Kohler White, 32 years old, of Hildebrand, North Carolina. He was president of Kohler Campbell, Inc., piano manufacturers of Granite Falls, North Carolina, and was at Chicago for an industry convention. He registered at the hotel on September 22nd, 1957. Identification of the nude body that landed on an inside court roof at the 4th floor level was made from a wedding ring bearing White's initials and those of his wife. Police reached the father, Julius, at Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and said he is satisfied from the description given by the police that the victim is his son. The father said Charles was in good health and spirits when he left home. The Charles Whites have 2 children. The death was reported by Fred Schaffer, a scout for the Chicago White Sox, who heard a thud outside his 5th floor room. He looked out the window and saw White's body. The window of White's room, number 135, was wide open. The Indianapolis Star, Wednesday, September 25th, 1957.
Wow. Wow, the 13th floor too.
The 13th floor.
I thought they try to not have a 13th floor on a lot of these buildings. This is what happens when
This is why you don't have a 13th floor.
This is why you don't have the 13th floor.
You might fall out naked.
In all seriousness, Kohler and Campbell is a very well-known piano brand. You see it a lot in piano stores, and you mostly see uprights. And so this was something that while we were researching Kohler and Campbell, because it's kind of one of those rich histories of, well, it used to be an American-made piano, dating all the way back to the early 1900s in New York and the late 1890s. 1896 is when it started by Charles Kohler
and John C. Campbell.
They started it. One of them was more a wood and steel guy. The other guy was more of a systems. Let's put this together, have a great working factory. And at one point they had a 750,000 square foot factory, just this humongous factory where they were pumping out, I think 45 pianos a day. But really, all you see are uprights.
Uprights.
And they did have a couple different companies that they acquired over the years. And one of their big products that they released was an Action.
Well, that was later on, like after they developed the pneumatic piano Action, which is basically air-driven. And so they're pretty much the guys that, I don't want to say they started it, but they really built a business around player pianos. And
so when we talk about player pianos, we're talking about those rolls.
With the rolls, the vacuum system that needed either a pump, a foot pump, or eventually you could plug in an electric vacuum motor. But the reason why they made mostly uprights was because that they always wanted to, their main thing was to give the maximum amount of value and piano to the customer. So that kind of kept them out of a grand business that was really booming. They did make, all of their uprights are called grands. There's like an upright grand, then a parlor grand, then they have like a even bigger grand. And there's one of them that they show on the internet that's been fully restored, and it's valued at about $17,000 or $18,000, and it's one of their larger grands. A lot of wood on these uprights.
And those were the early 1900s.
Correct. Now, what's interesting is that initially There was a large import around this time that was coming to an end of square pianos, and John Jacob Astor was the guy that was behind importing these square pianos and try to get them made. And he was one of the guys that eventually got into the piano manufacturing company ownership. Now, what's important about Kohler and Campbell is they sold a lot of their own pianos that were manufactured, but they sold on average about 50,000 actions a year to other player piano and other piano manufacturers. And they have a list on here. I'm not going to go through them, but they have some very admirable piano companies that used to be in business that all of their actions came from Kohler and Campbell.
Okay.
So they made a lot of what you would call a piano kit that you could ship to another manufacturer and put in their own cases or their own soundboards.
And then put the name on there.
And put their and put the name on there. They could put, like, Ted and Pat's piano featuring Kohler and Campbell action. So they did a lot of that.
That's interesting to see where Kohler and Campbell is today. This is a little foreshadowing, but to see where it is today and see where they've come from, it's interesting to see that Kohler and Campbell today is not the Kohler and Campbell of the past.
They, like all the other piano manufacturers, they went through a lot of, I guess, conglomeration and trimming down after World War II. And then around the time that this tragic accident happened here in '57, from around that time on, they were just mostly primarily selling pianos, because the player pianos did die off after the end of the 20s and 30s. It's not like someone was making them brand new all the way up.
Well, radio came out.
Radio came in, and then, well, the phonograph first, and then radio, and then you had the combination of what radio became. And then around the time that people were starting to stock up on those little spinets in the 50s, well, television was taking off. And I still say this to this day. The I Love Lucy show had a Baldwin spinet in their room that was donated to them by the guy in California. And that Mr. Piano, the guy that prints the piano atlas.
Okay.
He's the one that provided the piano for the TV show, and then now it's in the Smithsonian, I believe. It went all the way through, and it was never really paid for. It was donated. It was kind of interesting. But having that spinet, that upright piano in Lucy and Ricky's living room really did a lot to boost the consciousness of every American home typically has a piano in it. And
Kohler and Campbell made a whole bunch of spinets and consoles.
They made a whole bunch of spinets, and they made a lot of consoles and furniture pianos later on. But initially, their uprights were pretty much like plain Jane, straight up and down with massive wood and big sounds in them. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the company sold a lot of their pianos through what were some of their primarily retail outlets and dealers. And in 1985, this is when the change really started to happen. That brings us to where we are today, is Kohler and Campbell as a group with all those other subsidiary names they owned was purchased by Sherman Clay. And that relationship didn't last too long, because Sherman Clay eventually went out of business, and Samick, they're the ones that ended up buying the Kohler and Campbell name, and they still manufacture that piano name brand to this day.
Yeah, and so the Kohler and Campbells behind us are Samicks, and you see a lot of these in piano stores around the country because they are kind of widely available, but really it's kind of like where you were talking about with the Kohler and Campbell actions of the past. The insides are almost identical to a Samick in what they make out of their Indonesian factory, Samick being a Korean company, but their Indonesian factory makes these anywhere from 5 foot to about 7 foot grands, and instead of outfitting it with Samick on the front, on the fall board, and on the soundboard, they do it with Kohler and Campbell, and they really kind of make a whole package that looks and has the feel of that that very rich American brand name that they purchased and they've put together, and so it's something that in the industry we call like a stencil piano. And on some of the higher end Kohler and Campbells, they'll actually, I think they make them in Korea, but they'll actually use the Renner action. And we've seen a couple of these very, very high end pianos. The Renner action is, of course, used on Bosendorfer and on the Hamburg Steinways. And so really, it's a big range of what a Kohler and Campbell can be.
Oh, it really is. When you come across a Kohler and Campbell piano, the first thing you need to keep in mind is this mid-'80s and above or before 1980s? Because they're very distinctively different kind of pianos. We have some older Kohler and Campbells.
What's a quick test? is it polished?
Is it polished?
If it's polished, it's probably late 80s, 85 and newer, because that means it wasn't made here in the U.S.
Right.
If it's not polished and it's a wood finish, you're probably looking at something that predates that. That's the quickest
But that,
test.
and then also some of the older Kohler and Campbell uprights have the shorter regular length keys, as opposed to the imported ones that come from Korea that have the standard international key length. I will say this: almost every Kohler and Campbell piano I've ever played from Samick, they all play great and they all sound great, unless they were in a university for 10 years and you had junior and senior students pounding the hammers into, like, marble.
Well, on that note, let's take a listen to this one, and then we'll come back and close it out. Let's take a listen.
I liked your playing on that.
Thank you, thank you. Great sounding instrument. Really a nice action, plays well. But really, it's cool to see the name kind of live on into the modern age with Kohler and Campbell. I think some people are undecided on how they feel about stencil instruments and stencil pianos specifically, but Samick makes an excellent instrument, really at a valuable price point. So a lot of the times you'll see these as some of the most affordable brands that are available in a piano store, especially one that carries a lot of used instruments. And so a lot of times you can get a really good deal on one of these, and they're very quality for a beginner instrument.
Even I mean, that's like a intermediate pro level playing piano. I mean, it's maybe not anything you want to put on your album sleeve that you use to record it. Unless, of course, you had one of those 7 or 9 foot. Those are nice pianos. The bigger they are, the nicer almost every piano is going to get.
Yeah, and the fewer they make, the more attention to detail. But you'll see a lot of these out in the wild, and always kind of play very consistently and sound good. They have a great sound. Samick makes a great instrument. But yeah, that's the story of Kohler and Campbell and kind of whatever happened to them. This is part of our history catalog of cataloging instruments. Hope you guys learned something. If we left anything out that you're like, hey, I worked for Kohler and Campbell, or my grandfather did, or my grandfather was the guy who jumped out of the window and
or fell.
Who knows?
There's a mystery about it.
If you know anything about the mystery, please leave some comments. I know other people are literally, not literally, but they're dying to know. And it would be good to have some light shown on what actually happened, because a naked person falling from a window it's interesting.
It's different.
It's different. And in the piano world, it's very kind of exceptionally
That doesn't always happen.
Outrageous.
It's usually with the musicians, not so much with the manufacturers.
Yeah, so please leave some comments. Again, please subscribe. We love to bring you guys content. And if you have any suggestions on brands that you would love to see us review, we'd love to do it. So drop a comment and make sure you're subscribed to check out more of our great commentary. Thanks for watching.